Thank you. Good evening. Unlike most of my colleagues this evening, I had no problem with the water motif. My new book, rather fortuitously, and I swear I didn't choose it because of this evening, the title is When We Danced on Water. Actually, that's the end of the water motif for my novel, but I'm going to read from it anyway. There are two main characters in the novel, a woman named Vivi, who's in her early 40s. She's an artist, and she works as a waitress in a Tel Aviv cafe. And a man named Theodor, who turns 85 during the course of the novel. And he is a dancer, a choreographer, head of the Tel Aviv Ballet. He was on target to be a major dancer, but his career was derailed at a certain stage. I'd like to read two short sections, one of Vivi's and one of Theodor's. Vivi's needs no explanation, but I do need to tell you this about Theo's section. It takes place on a Friday night in September 1939, when Theodor is 17 and a half, and he's about to dance his first real role with the Royal Danish Ballet at the Berlin Staatsoper. And just before he's about to perform, the ballet is about to perform, an announcement is made that Germany that day has invaded Poland, and then what we later know to be the start of the Second World War is actually that day. And this is only minutes before he dances this dance that is about to change his life. And I think that's basically what you need to know. So first Vivi, and then Theodor. When Vivi leaves the coffee bar, she never takes the short, direct route home. First, in nearly any weather, she steps outside the shopping arcade, parks herself on the nearest bench, a slatted wooden affair that the Tel Aviv municipality occasionally paints green, and smokes one of the 3 daily cigarettes she allows herself. She stretches her legs out as far as they will go, wriggles her toes, watches passers-by and birds, and enjoys each deep inhalation of her Winstons. When she has had her fill of smoking and looking, she rises slowly, as if with regret, and chooses a direction. Sometimes she will walk to the right because the woman who just walked by was wearing a beautiful pair of shoes, and sometimes she will walk to the left because there are clouds in that direction. There are days when she closes her eyes and spins around, then chooses left or right, and days when she stands waiting for a sign, any sign, and does not move until that sign appears. Then she begins her perambulations, wending her way from street to street in concentric, uneven circles. She walks eastward down Kaplan Street, past the peak-roof houses with flower boxes built by the Templars, toward Azrieli Center, where she bends her head backward to stare at the edge of the triangular tower as it spikes the sky. She walks north to the open emptiness of Rabin Square. She walks west under ficus trees dangling vines like moss to the shade of the Royal Poincianas at Masaryk Square. And mostly, she walks south, where Tel Aviv really happens. She has what she calls her theme walks, still capricious but with a motif. So there is Scent Walk, where she picks up on the smells of coffee and steamed milk, falafel and shaved lamb's meat, hyssop seasoning and roasting cashews and coriander and chicken on a spit, and even certain people leaning into their wakes as they pass. There's Foliage Walk, for noticing and naming the great many flowering plants she encounters. There are Jewish walks, mostly at holiday times when she counts Stars of David in synagogues and Orthodox passersby and Chabad emissaries and old men selling skull caps on overturned orange crates. She has graffiti walks and merchandise walks and architecture walks and people walks. Her most frequent are baby walks, featuring soft, cuddly babies of every color and size and women with bellies in various stages of pregnancy. On bad days, she has ugly walks. Dog shit on the sidewalk, people spitting, honking cars, the junkies and pimps near the old central bus station. No matter what kind of walk she is having, though, she is aware of the stunning, relentless blue sky and green leaves nearly all year round. She wanders past old stores, Zion the Tailor, Madame Julie's Institute of Beauty, a hardware store offering Hebrew labor, and shiny new places, their names written in English only. She cuts through parking lots and apartment buildings and hotels in order to reach back streets. She emerges at the seashore and traverses beach after beach, each with its own crowd and style. She walks like this for an hour, sometimes 2, until finally she has had her fill of the city and can go in peace and silence to her apartment. The curtain rose, and Theodor gathered himself into position. At first, it was hard for him to focus on the ballet, and indeed the entire troupe took a few minutes to recover from the news. But the orchestra was outstanding, and the audience, exuding excitement, was supportive and uncritical. So the troupe warmed quickly and left the world behind. Theodor jumped into position, moved away from the wall to lift a girl, then glided back to his spot. He sailed through his pas de deux with Niels in perfect synchronization, the best they had ever danced it. They smiled exuberantly at one another at its conclusion. His partner was dancing her short solo now, and Theodor prepared to step into the spotlight once again, first to partner her, and then for his own solo. He thought briefly of tanks and troops roaring over bridges on the Vistula River, and then pushed these visions from his head. He stepped forward. She was slightly slippery in his hands, but he was accustomed to the nuances of her body and held her tightly. Arabesque, arabesque, glissade, glissade. She floated gracefully in his arms until, spent, she twirled away from him and out of his vision. Theodor was alone at center stage. Behind him, without looking over his shoulder, he knew the corps de ballet stood posed in small, asymmetric groupings. Close ahead and below were the musicians, just completing the cadenzas that ushered him to this place at the center of the stage. And all around him and ahead, and above him as well, were 2,000 faces, white, groomed and plumed, plucked and shaved and oiled. Men in uniform, women in feathers and fur, all sparkling with pleasure and confidence, their faces hungry with anticipation like baby birds. For a small moment, Theodor considered these faces, all assembled here to watch him spin and leap through 3 minutes of trifling Danish music. But as he planted his feet, as he pulled his torso high above his legs, as he rotated his head slowly, slowly to the left and floated his arms gently into place, the dancers and the musicians and the audience disappeared. Theodor was alone with his body, poised. He could hear the sound of his breathing, slow and deliberate, could feel the pulse of blood coursing to his toes and fingers. The orchestra sounded the last chord to his introduction, the grand pause that would end only when Theodor broke the spell of silence. The conductor turned his attention to Theodor on stage. The hall fell completely silent in watchful anticipation. But Theodor was in no hurry. Here it was, this moment. A moment of infinite space, as if he had squeezed his way through a tight, dark tunnel and found himself at this spot unfurled. This moment of infinite possibility, too, of ways to travel or not. He could stop right now, crawl back into his safe tunnel. He could freeze, fail to move, crumple. He could rotate his head straight forward toward the musicians and the audience and scream insults at them in Polish. Worst of all, he could dance badly. The audience, the musicians, the dancers, they were waiting for him to move. He knew this moment had gone on too long. He must give the signal to the conductor, and he wished to. He was looking forward to his dance. But he was enjoying this moment of all possibilities too much. He had sensed what he would know to be true only many years hence, that this bubble of freedom and floating would be his last, that he would tumble headlong to one destiny, setting his future, one certain future, in motion. He knew that the moment he moved his foot, something would have changed, and there would be no return. At the end of this moment, his moment and no one else's, as his right leg steeled itself to support his weight, as his head craned upward from his neck in a tiny, imperceptible gesture, as his toes strained the cloth of his slippers, as the audience and the musicians and the dancers breathed as one with him, Theodor understood with great clarity, as if remembering, that he would dance without a flaw. Knew this would be the most perfect dance of his life, in fact, its pinnacle, that at 17 and a half, his body would spin, stretch, and soar, that there was nothing he could not do. Now he was ready, and with a touch of melancholy, mixed with the unbridled excitement of youth, he sent a wordless farewell to his moment, pointed the toes of his left foot as taut as a freshly sharpened pencil, and sailed into the music. Thank you. Gioconda read a poem written by a man in prison, and I have a second poem to read in his place, another poet's place. His name is Joe Ricky Knight, and he is serving a sentence at the Eastern Kentucky Correctional Complex in West Liberty, Kentucky. The name of his poem is An Escape Artist. At 8, I was a magician, able to slip from any confinement. After my stepfather beat me and imprisoned me in my bedroom, I decided to disappear, sneaking into the passageway between the left brain and the right, dropping through a trap door and sliding down a chute to the bottom of the cortex, where I searched a maze of memories for a safe place to hide, and ended up at Grandpa's farm, where we flew kites all afternoon on a hill behind the house. And now, 39 years later, I slip out of my cell here at the Kentucky State Pen each time I write a poem. Last week, I slipped out a window, climbed down a rope, eluding guards, then scaled the perimeter wall. I wandered along the Cumberland riverbank, happened upon an abandoned boat, and rode the currents to the Ohio, Mississippi, and the Gulf, where I watched a man hanging from a bright red canopy above the rocking waters, parasail into the sky.